Good evening and welcome to the April 17th, 2017 Board of Commissioners meeting. We're just coming out of a work session and now we're ready to start the meeting. If Mr. Beaumont would be kind enough to give us the invocation and pledge of allegiance, if you would all stand. Heavenly Father, we come before you this evening, for this is one of my favorite times of the year. Lord, we see the new life in the trees and the flowers. And Lord, we're reminded of rebirth. And Father, following Easter, this is a call to remember the reason for this season. Lord, I ask that as the flowers are blooming and the trees are budding, Lord, that we too, as this Board of Commissioners, would remain focused on the growth of Currituck County and what's best for the county and its constituency. Lord, I ask for your wisdom this evening. I ask that this board would be guided, Father, and look to you and rule as you would have us rule. Father, I ask your blessing upon this evening. I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Beaumont. If you could all be seated, please. Our first item this evening is approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to amend our agenda to put under county manager for us to go into closed session concerning a personnel issue.
Okay, we would put that under after the county manager's report. Any other changes to the agenda?
I'll make a motion we approve the agenda.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Our next item is public comment. I do not have anyone signed up for public comment. Did anyone come in late? With that, I will close the public comment section. Our next item is administrative reports. The NOAA National Monitor Marine Sanctuary, Mr. Will Sassarossi, Maritime Archaeologist, was going to give us a report.
Thank you very much, and again, thank you for having me tonight. My name is Will Sassarossi. I'm a maritime archaeologist at the Monitor National Marine Sanctuary. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the USS Monitor, and if not, just do a brief rundown of what we do at the Monitor National Marine Sanctuary office. We're one of 13 National Marine Sanctuaries across the United States. We are the smallest, but we were the first. We were the first in North Carolina, established in 1973 to protect, preserve, and tell the story of the USS Monitor, which is a Civil War ironclad, lost in 1862. It is basically that vessel ushered in the age of iron warships. So it is greatly important to not only our national heritage, but to international history at large. So since 1975, our office has protected a 1 mile column of water around the site. In the late 1990s, early 2000s, there was a recovery effort to bring up some major artifacts, including the turret, the Daldron guns, and some other pieces, including the anchor, that were thought to maybe be deteriorating and lost due to either shifting environments or what have you. But it was a 4-year process bringing up these artifacts, and these are being conserved at the Mariners Museum in Newport News, Virginia. Ultimately, the artifacts will be brought back to the various museums across North Carolina, but they have to go under a process called a conservation process that will last probably about 20 years. And they're in the being housed in the Batten Conservatory, which is actually the largest metals conservation lab in the world. In these pictures, you can see the huge tank, which is actually holding the turret. And at a later time, during the summer, we empty the tank, and I'd offer an invitation for the commissioners to come visit the tank itself and actually get hands on the turret. But that's what we're currently doing. And ultimately, it's to preserve and promote the history of the sailors, the history of the ship itself. But in that process of recovery in the early 2000s, 2 human remains were found inside the turret. And so through a lengthy process trying to identify the remains, working with multiple other agencies across the U.S., we were unable to fully identify who they were, but their remains were laid to rest in Arlington National Cemetery. So there's this grave site in the Arlington Cemetery, very prominent, that housed the 2 remains of these fallen sailors. And so as part of our ongoing preservation and commemoration of the USS Monitor, we have a lengthy process of working not only to promote the history, but to preserve and protect the remains that were found at the site. But we've also come to realize there is a much larger history in North Carolina that spans not only from the Civil War, but you go back farther to early exploration, even farther back, Native American, but more recent times. And World War II, as we celebrate our 75th anniversary of 1942, where it really hit home to the East Coast. Since 2008, our office has really expanded our research in this realm. North Carolina is unique in that it probably houses the greatest concentration of Battle of the Atlantic World War II shipwrecks. Over 79 merchant vessels were lost in North Carolina alone, a grand total of about 93 vessels in North Carolina waters. That was both merchant vessels, Allied naval vessels, and German vessels, all housed in North Carolina waters. It was following the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. Germany declared war on the United States, and by January of 1942, German U-boats were attacking merchant shipping up and down the East Coast, but primarily in North Carolina because of various shipping lanes, traffic, the topography and geography made it really easy for German U-boats to come in quickly and make an attack and escape to deeper water. And over the course of basically 6 months, over 1,600 casualties were lost just in North Carolina alone. And 1,200 of those were merchant marines. This is important in many ways because for up until basically the late 1980s, the merchant marine were not given veteran status by the U.S. government. They were considered still a separate entity, apart from the U.S. Navy, apart from the Air Force, apart from the Army, until the 1980s. So they weren't able to receive veterans benefits until much later when they actually really needed it. So to kind of recap of what we did this last year, this would be our 8th, 9th field season, working with Battle of the Atlantic shipwrecks. And the ones that we primarily focused on were 2 from the Battle of the KS-520 convoy. And in this KS-520 convoy, you essentially have your predator and prey side by side. The U-576, a German U-boat, attacked convoy, KS-520. It's just a designation moving Key West south. It's just the number of the convoy. But it attacked the convoy on July 15th. And in this attack, it set out 4 bow torpedoes. But inexplicably, after loosing all the bow torpedoes, it popped up in the middle of the convoy, which is terrible if you're a submarine. And immediately, the armed escorts and the air cover that was following the convoy depth charged and bombarded the U-boat, sending it down to the ocean floor. So at the time, everyone thought that it was sunk by the depth charges and the armed convoy shooting deck guns at them. But no one really knew because it had been lost for about 73 years. Until 2014, an expedition was able to fully identify the location and positively identified U-576. It's lost in about 750 feet of water, and then right next to it is actually the Bluefields, which was one of the vessels that was hit twice by torpedoes. Of those 4 torpedoes, 2 of them hit the Bluefields, sinking it immediately. And then this last summer, we were able to, our office, among other partners, BOEM, and a nonprofit company called Project Baseline, were able to use two-person submersibles to actually go down onto the shipwrecks themselves and get first eye contact with the shipwrecks since that day in 1942. Amazing photography, video, laser scan measurements of the shipwrecks were taken, and the conditions of these sites is absolutely amazing. The preservation, it's almost like they were just set down there. Both ships actually basically just set down there and left, and they're pristine. The only thing that's missing is the wood features, which you would see lost anyways. And so we were able to get great video, great photography, photos, great laser scanning, but all the while we're still remembering that this is a tomb for the German sailors. There was no recovery of any sailors that had popped to the surface, and then through our research we noticed that all the hatches were closed, which meant they all died inside. So this is a tomb for 45 German sailors. Granted, they were on the opposition, they were our enemy at the time, but it's still a place of commemoration, and remember it's a grave site. On the Bluefields on the other side, everyone made it off safely, and there were no loss of life. But these two sites are only 200 meters apart from each other. And it's the only place on the East Coast where you see these two predator and prey right next to each other. It's super unique, and it's only here in North Carolina. So these are some of the images from the laser scan measurements, super high resolution detailed, that we were able to accomplish gathering. The other main project from last summer was going to the YP-389. Another, it's a naval vessel. It was a converted fishing trawler that the United States used, and immediately following Pearl Harbor, there was a shortage of naval vessels on the East Coast, so they had to basically put deck guns, depth charges on whatever was basically floating at the time, and the YP-389 was tasked to guard the Cape Hatteras minefield, and it was sunk in a gun battle with U-701, which is another of the 4 German U-boats that is sunk in North Carolina waters. And we had divers going down to 350 feet, getting amazing photography of these vessels. 6 sailors died on YP-389. Again, so it's a place of reverence and a place to remember the horrific and grand scale of the Battle of the Atlantic. That is not just considered a European or Pacific battle or World War II. It hit right here off of our coast. And not a lot of people really understand or fully grapple with that concept. It was suppressed in the media, but you don't, I'm sure everyone's well aware of or has known relatives or neighbors that can speak upon seeing ships burning in the night or oil washing on the shores or even bodies washing on shore. It's down in Currituck. There's a grave site for British sailors that had washed ashore. So what our office keeps coming back to, that this is it's a time to remember. It's a great opportunity to promote the history, but also a great time to remember what occurred right off of the shores here in North Carolina. Again, over 90 vessels were lost just in North Carolina alone. It's the biggest concentration on the East Coast of World War II losses, which again is super unique to North Carolina and its history, and people of all destinations could come to North Carolina and see this history right off their beach. And so what we've done since 2013 at our office has gone through a process of considering expanding the monitor sanctuary size from that 1 mile column of water to incorporate these World War II wrecks as part of a larger sanctuary system. And our goal is to, again, just promote and protect these sites and not anything else, really. It's all maritime heritage based in protecting and expanding the size of the sanctuary. And in January 8th of 2016, we put in a notice of intent to actually start the ball rolling to see where expansion might go. And we had public hearings in Hatteras, Raleigh, DC, Beaufort, and there was one other, Jeanette's Pier. And we'll do that again this coming fall. But we went through this public commenting period, and we heard resounding positive and also skepticism. And we'll be honest with that. It's main concern was fishing access, and nothing that we are putting together has anything to do with fishing. We promote fishing as a sanctuary system. Our current regulations at Monitor, freely admit they're a little outdated, and we're going through this process. And as part of the process, we can change those current regulations and to get them more updated and promote better access. I think at the time, the regulations at Monitor, they were put forth to dissuade people from looting the site. And now that things are a little bit more updated, people have GPS, they know exactly where the monitor is. And if they're going to take it, we're not there on the water to enforce removal of the stuff. Our goal is to educate, and that's where it's been since basically day one, is to educate the public about what we're doing. And so as we go through this expansion process, we are currently drafting management plans using the public comment that we heard February, March, taking those into consideration. Then hopefully this fall we'll be able to present an actual draft management plan, which it might be easier for Board of Commissioners to actually make a comment on. But tonight I just wanted to make everything aware of where we are in this process. And if there were any questions that I could try to answer, I'd be more than happy to. But again, we are just in this phase where we're almost there to put forth a management plan. And the idea is to protect sites that don't currently have protections. There is the Sunken Military Craft Act, which protects naval vessels and naval aircraft, but doesn't provide protection to the majority of the wreck sites that we're working with and wanting to promote their history. And we want to keep access to fishing and keep access for divers. The only thing I think you'll see in any regulation would be don't take from the shipwrecks themselves, or don't deliberately destroy the wrecks. So that's where we are in this process, and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I've just got a quick. Did you say you're working on trying to protect the U-boats as well, as far as being looted, or are they only protected now? Or
they currently fall under a protection called the Sunken Military Craft Act.
when did that come into effect, roughly?
Last year, really.
Okay.
The Sunken Military Craft Act is essentially an act that Congress passed with the effort of protecting all our vessels in any foreign field, as well as protecting adversaries, as say like someone else's boats in our waters.
And I was just asking that. I mean, back in the late 90s, I dove on one of the German U-boats, and there was a commercial vessel out there just tearing up the insides with one of those, and just you see stuff floating all over the place, and it was just a shame to see something doing something like that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
I just couldn't believe they were doing that.
There's three of the four U-boats that are in North Carolina waters are diveable. This last one, U-576, is too deep for anyone to go recreational diving on. But U-352, which was really located in 2004, it had been kind of spotted, but then covered up. But in 2004, it was wide open for diving, and it is possibly the number one diving site in North Carolina, and arguably the East Coast. If you're coming to dive a World War II wreck, it is within 100 feet of water. If you don't need any advanced diving other than your open water diving, and you can go and see a piece of history that is, I personally think is breathtaking, and it's unique to North Carolina. But it also is, because it was located so recently, there's still many pieces to it, whereas some of the older wrecks, like you mentioned, may have been kind of looted pretty badly. I'll say that. But so our goal is to, for the other wrecks that don't necessarily have any protection, merchant vessels, it goes back to the owner who ultimately has possession of these. They don't fall under any Military Craft Act, even though it was a military casualty. There's some weird legal, and that's ultimately where this is intended to go, is to give clarity and protection to shipwrecks that don't necessarily have that. So that's what I'll say about that. But again, our office is open for any questions, any tours, anything that open to answer any questions. We're there to help out.
Is there a phone number that the public can call if you want to set up a tour?
Absolutely. So there's, I will leave my card. I guess we give it to anyone. All right, thank you. So there's also a public, I don't know off the top of my head, because we changed our phone system around and it's kind of wonky, but you can get, you can call the Mariners Museum or my office to kind of get a tour. When the turret is drained, they have a tour, but sometimes it costs a fee for the public to go. It's kind of a way for them to raise money. But if there's also an opportunity for like either an off, after hours type deal, we can obviously bring people down and show and promote some really interesting maritime heritage pieces. So,
well, that brings another question. Is there a website, maybe off the top of your head?
Oh yeah, it's monitor.noaa.gov. That is the place where you can see images of the shipwrecks. We put all the shipwrecks that we worked on this shipwreck page within our main website. It gives locations, it gives depths, it gives a historical narrative, basically a baseball card's worth of what the shipwreck looks like. We've also created some, and we're going to be creating more, dive slates. Like if you are a diver, you take these little plastic slates. It gives a full site plan of what each wreck site looks like. You can spot certain things while you're diving down there. We have those digitally on on the website as well, along with some of these 3D models that we've been able to create. There's the YP389 we just did, U576. We have digital 3D renderings that you can zoom in and zoom out and get a first-hand experience of what the shipwreck looks like right now. So I invite everyone to look at it. And again, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to call me or anyone in the office. So again, thank you very much for all your time.
Will, thank you for coming in and giving us a presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to public hearing. Public hearing and consideration of resolution and order closing Old U.S. Highway 158, also known as Secondary Road 1405, and Old Ferry Landing, Coin Jock, Poplar Branch Township. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Woody.
I'm going to present that.
Sorry,
Mr. Chair. Pursuant to Section 153A.241 of the General Statutes, a county may close or abandon any public road or public easement within the county that is not in the control of the North Carolina Department of Transportation. To close or abandon a public road, the statute requires several things to first occur. The Board of Commissioners must adopt a resolution of intent to close or abandon the road and call for a public hearing. A public notice over 3 successive weeks must be published in the newspaper. A copy of the resolution adopted by the Board of Commissioners of its intent to close the road must be sent to any adjacent property owner who is not a party to the petition requesting closure or abandonment of the road. And lastly, notice of the road closing or abandonment must be posted on 2 locations along the road to be closed or abandoned. The county has received a request from Currituck Waterfront Business Park LLC that Old U.S. Highway 158, also known as Secondary Road 1405 or Old Ferry Landing, adjacent to its property be closed pursuant to this statutory process. You will remember at your meeting on March 20th of this year, you adopted a preliminary resolution of intent to close and abandon this particular road and called for a public hearing within that resolution. Notice was thereafter published for 3 successive weeks in the Daily Advance. The certified mail was sent to the Stone Cipher heirs in Texas as the address shown on the county's tax records, enclosing a copy of the resolution of the Board of Commissioners in its intent to close. The Stone Cipher heirs were not party to the request to close or abandon this road. And finally, there was posted at 2 locations along the road a sign indicating the public hearing and purpose for the public hearing tonight to close and abandon Old U.S. Highway 158. Following the public hearing, which is another requirement of the statute for closure and abandonment of a road, the board may adopt a resolution, which is contained within your agenda package, ordering closure and abandonment of the road upon finding to your satisfaction 2 things. Number 1, that closing Old U.S. Highway 158 is not contrary to the public interest. And secondly, that no person owning property in the vicinity of the road would be deprived of reasonable means of ingress or egress to their property. So with that, Mr. Chairman, it would be appropriate at this time for you to open the public hearing.
And with that, I'll open the public hearing. First individual would be Lisa Ray. If you could, please state your name and address. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa Ray, Ray Commercial, 104 Radio Road, Powell's Point, North Carolina. I represent the Stone Cipher family, which obviously is in Texas. And the reason that I'm here is to discuss, and hopefully you will agree, to postpone the abandonment procedure for 60 days. Ms. Cherie McCartney will be here next week to meet with attorneys to try to get the road abandonments, which there are 2, recorded in a form where we can actually put that to record, and then we can resolve the ownership of that road, because it is actually the ownership of the Stone Cipher family and should not be split, which would happen if you adopted that abandonment this evening.
Did you have anything else, ma'am? Did you have anything else?
Quibble Engineering has done the work on this, and they will be finishing that up as we work with them next week as well. So I believe that hopefully by June 15th, we should be complete.
Thank you.
And then after that, I'll present that to you for further abandonment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next individual is Pete Thompson.
Good evening. I represent the Currituck Waterfront Park. We've been developing the land beside the road. We've worked with Mr. Woody and the county to bring back what used to be a farm into high land now. And we simply want to find out what we have. It's really that simple. We want to find out what our boundaries are and who owns what. We're certainly not against a delay till the June 15th. This is not urgent. We're trying to find out what our boundaries are of the land if this were to go forward. The boundaries are important to us because in that particular area there is some high land and there is some wetland. And even 20 feet makes a difference, which would be part of the road that comes in front of our land. So we're trying our best to go forward with it. We're trying to make a waterfront park there. We own not just that 21 acres, but another 180 acres on the other side of the bridge. And we're working with the county to try to make that work. That's really all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Any type of hardship if we were to grant the 60-day extension?
Absolutely not. I'd be delighted to have this clarified. This is really the reason we bought the motion, was to try to clarify this. Ms. Ray has told me that, but I've seen nothing. I know nothing legally about it, and quite honestly, I always thought this belonged to the NCDOT and would come here under that provision, sir.
Thank you.
That makes
Thank you, Mr.
sense?
Thompson.
Yes.
Thank you.
There's no one else signed up for the public hearing. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this? With that, I'll close the public hearing and open the floor for discussion or a motion.
Mr. Chair, I've got a discussion. When Ms. Ray was up here, what was the time frame that was needed for this? I guess for them to meet with the lawyer and get this boundaries kind of. Did they need till June?
I believe Ms. Ray's at 60 days.
So that would. Okay, so that would put us on next meeting back in June. Yeah. Okay. I mean, it sounded like the applicant didn't have any concerns right now, just to clarify what the boundaries might be. So when we do this, both parties then would be happy with the outcome, and I think we can still move forward with it. So, I mean,
Seems reasonable.
yeah. I mean, I'd like to make a motion that we postpone the any action on this until and bring this back to June 19th to allow the applicant and everyone to get this meeting take place, and then bring it before us again and make the decision then, if that's.
I'd second that motion.
Any further discussion?
Is that allowable?
Oh, certainly.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to new business, consideration of an ordinance amending Chapter 10, Division 7 of the Currituck County Code of Ordinances by adding Section 10-129 to provide for dune protection. And I'll hand it over to Mr. McCree.
Mr. Chairman, this ordinance arises out of some of the conversation that occurred during your board retreat back in January, and concern that there's perhaps not an ordinance, or at least sufficient ordinances in place that would ensure protection and integrity of the dune system on the county's beaches. It's interesting that actually this ordinance before you tonight was drafted in 2010 when a prior board was considering the same issue, but it for some reason never received any traction. So I'll now walk you through the proposed ordinance. First of all, on page 1 at line 18, you'll see that Section 10-128, unattended property on the beach, is stricken, but wait, it reappears at the end. It made sense to incorporate that ordinance into the body of what is being considered tonight. Section 10-125 at line 27 of page 1 would provide that to the extent that this ordinance conflicts with any Coastal Area Management Act regulations adopted by the Division of Coastal Management, those regulations would take precedence over the county's ordinance. Section 10-126 at line 32 on page 1 begins a definition section of terms contained within the body of the ordinance, and that continues on to the top of page 3. On page 3 at line 3, Section 10-127 provides for the territorial application of this ordinance, which would be the primary and frontal dune system as defined by this ordinance, and to the ocean beaches located on the Currituck Outer Banks. At line 6, Section 10-128 provides for the dune and the beach and dune protection measures, and so it would deem unlawful within the dune system as defined within the ordinance the following acts: walking or traversing on dunes outside of an improved or unimproved dune walkover access, those terms are defined within the body of the ordinance; allowing pets to walk or traverse on the dunes outside of an improved or unimproved dune walkover access; utilizing an improved dune walkover structure that has been damaged and officially posted by the county building inspector as an unsafe structure, which of course does occur often after storm events. Removing, damaging, or destroying healthy, non-invasive dune plant species, and then there's a list of them, including sea oats and American beach grass, among some others. Installation of vegetation inconsistent with sand dune systems, such as long grasses or sod or herbaceous varieties that are not commonly known to be salt tolerant, or that are determined to be invasive species, such as beach vitex, which is prohibited later on in the ordinance. Operating any vehicle, moped, motorcycle, or using any horse on or across any frontal primary dune, or in such manner that would destroy the natural vegetation. Degrading, disturbing, or compromising the integrity of the dune structure, and prohibited activities related to that would be digging, shelling, mining, or mechanical alteration of the dune topography, playing, sliding, climbing, or rappelling on the frontal or primary dunes or any dune escarpment, discharging water into the dune where it would cause significant scouring, erosion, or otherwise affect the integrity of the dune, development activities without a valid building permit, zoning permit, health department permit, or approval from CAMA, storing objects or construction materials on the primary dune system, and then littering. As I mentioned a moment ago, on page 4 at line 9, there is a declaration that beach vitex is found to be a public nuisance due to significant negative impacts upon beaches, dune systems, and nesting turtle populations, and also the native vegetation such as sea oats and American beach grass, and so it would be made unlawful for any person to plant or cause to be planted beach vitex on the Currituck Outer Banks. Exemptions to this ordinance would be development activities authorized by the county, the health department with jurisdiction in the county, or CAMA, dune or property maintenance activities including planting or fertilization of native soft-tolerant dune vegetation, sand fence installation, minor dune repairs, and removal of litter or debris. As the board may know and the public may know, we do have a grant program in which the county now is providing grant monies for persons to plant the dunes. So that would be exempt. Activities within the developed portion of the dune system, federal, state, and local officials engaged in official regulatory activities, and finally an exemption would be persons engaged in research, conservation, preservation, or extension activities as authorized by the county manager. And then at line 35, now at section 10-129, you again see the unattended property on the beach provision is placed back into this new ordinance. I'll be glad to answer any questions, and this is commended to the board for its adoption.
I have, looking at that, just to make sure of the law of unintended consequence. So we have several properties that have to go over the dune for driveways, et cetera. This would be subservient, I guess, to any state and federal laws that would hamper someone's ability to do that.
Yes, I think it would also be exempt under the activities within the developed portion of the dune system.
Okay.
And following up with that question, when we talk about places that people can walk, these are going to be well marked, or these are going to be obvious things. But again, private driveways that come off the beach. I've seen people that have tried to come off the beach, and in doing so, they don't realize they're going into a private driveway and had to try to back out, get bogged down, tear up some of the dunes even worse. So do we need to make sure that these private driveways are properly marked along with the public access ramps so we can enforce this? Does this need a section in there?
I really haven't thought through that particular issue.
Because if we're talking about walkways, I don't want a person coming down one of those driving ramps, because when you get started on one of those ramps, you're not stopping. And if we're going to mark those, I think we need to make sure we have the private ramps as well as the public marked.
How would we mark people's driveways? I mean, the ramps are basically designated through milepost markers and various.
Well, there are many people that drive and swear that they were driving over.
Well,
ramps.
yeah. I mean, there's always going to be that. I mean, there's some things you just can't regulate or fix. So.
But if we put something up that says at milepost 16 and a half, there will be a public ramp well marked, something before they get onto the beach, so they know where they're at. I mean, that's my concern, is just that if we're going to mark these other things, why not mark? So I don't have to say to, John Smith citizen, hey, guess what? It's obviously not marked here. What are you driving over there for?
So I guess we could fairly easily mark the ramps a little bit better, the public ramps.
I would think so. That I
ramps.
think would be, of course, done outside the ordinance.
Right.
Um,
Well, that would allay some of your concerns.
And do we need something in here saying, only, authorized ramps, or something in here, some type of language, exemptions, additions, anything else?
Designated.
Designated.
we could add that language that someone is prohibited from driving across a dune other than at recognized ramps or permitted
Right away.
drives to property.
I think that would be a better addition.
Okay.
Any further comments? With that, I'll open the floor for a motion.
Did you want to do that and add your language?
I'll make the motion that we adopt this with the addition of wordage or terminology to include driving ramps or private driveways to be marked or illegal to, appropriate language that can be brought back to the board when it comes to driving over the dunes.
Do you want to bring it back, or do you just want to adopt a resolution by adding such language to the ordinance?
I'm not sure what the language would be in legal terms.
So I think we would have to table this for now to allow that language to be added.
Well, we can certainly do that and bring it back to you at your second meeting in
Or can
May.
we designate you to add that language?
Well, it probably is good to have the actual language in front of you so that you understand exactly what it is that you're adopting.
So I withdraw that motion and make a motion to continue where you can add the language for driving.
I think it'd be appropriate to make, to entertain a motion
That's your motion?
to table or
Continue it.
continue this matter.
Then I'll second that.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on, consideration of an ordinance amending Chapter 10, Division 2 of the Currituck County Code of Ordinances by adding Section 10-65 to provide that no person shall operate a motor vehicle on the beach strand or foreshore with tires containing air pressure greater than 20 pounds per square inch. With that, I'll hand it over to Mr. McCree.
Mr. Chairman, this proposed ordinance to you is again, an issue that has been discussed by previous boards but never acted upon. What is proposed to you is because of a concern raised by persons who regularly travel the beach and to try to stop persons from being stuck or to create the washboard effect on the beach that causes problems driving, would be to require that there be an air down of tire pressure within tires for any person that's operating a motor vehicle on the beach. So what would be proposed is an addition to the Code of Ordinances to add Section 10-65 motor vehicle tire pressure and provide that no person shall drive or operate a motor vehicle on the beach strand or foreshore, and those terms are defined within the main body of Chapter 10, with tires containing air pressure exceeding 20 pounds per square inch, or PSI. I know in a meeting with Commissioner White last Thursday, I think he was expressing some thought that perhaps that number should be increased to 25 pounds per square inch, but I'll entertain any questions the board has.
Yeah, well, I'll follow up with that, I guess. And reading that, and there's certain vehicles that just don't require going to that much. My 3/4 ton truck does much better at 25 to 30, and there maybe need a little more depth on this too after thinking about it a little further, because if you've got, say, well, it's not Griggs anymore, Kempsville lumber trucks, they're probably going down to 50 pounds in those or something, but maybe we should think about adding a little bit more layers to this to clean it up, to provide for those guys so that they're gonna adjust where they need to be, basically, to make it work for them.
You're right. There's some vehicles that don't require
Right.
tires.
Or an
Don't require.
exclusionary language in there to allow for them to adjust as
If a
needed.
vehicle or a tire is rated at a certain, then yeah, maybe we can add that to it.
Well, I know I've seen some models from other communities that did talk about, for example, a greater tire pressure for a motor vehicle with gross weight in excess of 10,000 pounds.
Right. There you go.
That's something we can certainly model, and we can bring back a modification to you if you would like.
Oh, what I've seen in the past is it's a percentage of your normal operating air pressure, because because my truck, 20 pounds is.
Right, I got the same truck, so yeah,
So-
25 or 30 in your truck is just
Correct.
is sufficient to do the
Correct.
job.
So I guess, I would move that we table this until we had a little more constraint or a little more flexibility for someone else already.
Before we get any deeper into that, was there any other questions? Did you have any concerns or anything?
Again, we come back to that same question of, it's great to come up with ideas such as, I know part of it also is whether it's a 4x4 vehicle, also airing down, where can they? We can always ask commercial places, do we want to add somewhere where we as the county can say that, such as at our county building over there, we have an air down station to where they could pull up and add air to their tires or air down? That's my concern. We're asking these people to do something, but we're not providing them a location. Where do you stop? Where do you take and do these things? So are we responsible for that? Because I for one, I know my limitations. A lot of folks, hey, I'll put 20 pounds of pressure in my tire and I'll drive off the beach all the way to the mainland and halfway home to Virginia Beach and go, oh, wait a minute, I forgot. And then they come back and say, well, my tires are torn up because you told me to air down. At least if we offer a location over there, whether it be through a contract with somebody else or at our own facility. And I'm not looking for a major air thing, but sort of like what they have at Wawa, where they can tell what the pressure is and they can put it back to that.
Well, I would say that's an opportunity for private sector to come up with something. There's a dollar to be made there. So Winks might install another 5 air pumps and people stop there. And
I say, certainly the county does not have a legal
Right.
duty to provide
Right.
a place for persons to stop and air down or to
they find a
increase
way.
the pressure back in their tires.
And the chairman is going to accept the role of the air guy.
The air guy. The floor is open for a motion.
All right, I believe you have one.
So I move that we table this until we investigate what the numbers should be relative to the various weights that access the beach, number one, and number two, that we do in fact come up with a mechanism by which we can identify resources to the public as to where they can air down and or air back up, preferably before they wind up in Virginia Beach.
Would you like to put a time frame on this?
I'd like to see this in our second meeting in May.
I will second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on, consideration of an ordinance amending Chapter 8 of the Currituck County Code of Ordinances by adding Article 6, regulating tow service operators. With that, I'll hand it over to Mr. McCready.
Your final ordinance tonight.
This isn't going to be good.
Yeah.
Again, this is an ordinance that was considered by a prior board in 2009, and indeed the draft that's before you tonight was drafted back then. It never received any traction after its initial rollout. But before you tonight now is an ordinance that will amend the Code of Ordinances to provide for regulation of tow service operators. Section 8-86, page 1, line 30, provides for the definitions to be used in interpreting this ordinance. And going on to page 2, line 4 creates section 8-87, permit and license required. No tow service shall engage in the business of towing vehicles on the Currituck Outer Banks, it should say, from the terminus of NC Highway 12 to the Virginia state line without first obtaining a permit from the county's manager or manager's designee. Line 8, section 8-88 then provides for the permit and an application process and requires a type of information that an applicant would be required to provide to the county as they apply for a permit to tow on the North Beach. There then at line 26 is a provision that within 5 days after receipt of the application, the county manager or county manager's designee shall cause an investigation to be made of the application to ensure that it is compliant and the person applying for the permit meets the requirements of the ordinance. Line 31, subparagraph C of section 8-88 provides that the manager or manager's designee will issue a tow service permit when the manager or manager's designee finds that the tow service business location and its storage facility are located within the county or a county contiguous to Currituck County. That all insurance policies and insurance coverages required by state law have been obtained by the applicant, and the requirements of this article and all other governing laws and ordinances are met. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Mr. McCree, I've got a question, I guess, and this might be addressed at the top of page 2, where it says a towing service means a business. If a friend of mine were to get stuck and he called me and I went down there and decided to hook up and tow him all the way off the beach, that would protect me as a private citizen, even though I'm not charging him, but I know him and I'm just going to pull it off? Or does that not protect that
Definition
person?
of tow service. Is that what you're asking?
What's
about?
that?
The definition of tow service? Is that
Correct, because, yeah.
Yes,
'cause-
I would say that would not be included within the definition of tow service.
Okay.
So this
So it would
strictly-
allow for friends or somebody to tow somebody
Right.
and that, okay.
Or a Good Samaritan.
How are you going to know if it's a friend?
We're not charging them.
$100 anybody's your
right,
friend.
right. You can have a lot of
A
friends.
report of a huge tow
The,
bill.
Right.
In talking with the sheriff's department about this, they pretty much know who the weekend players are that come down here to make a little extra scratch to do this. I think it's one of the good things is that we can stop those individuals now from, profiting. And we're not supposed to be having business money change hands on the beach up there, with the exception of these tow truck operators. So it's kind of a twofold thing. So.
And there's also, from the sheriff department's concern from back in 2009, was to make sure that the persons that are actually towing vehicles are trained and have the appropriate equipment to do that, to prevent damage that has occurred in the past to vehicles, and try to provide some kind of consumer protection to some extent.
I don't see on there anything about markings on these vehicles. I know that
think it
most
says.
tow companies, maybe I missed it.
Didn't you have something here about marking? I believe you did.
Well, they're required to provide a description and size, capacity of all tow trucks used by the tow operator now.
They're out on the beach, something that would say John's Towing Service 252.
Well,
Not it.
they will be issued a permit, which I guess we would contemplate, much like the
Beach tour operator.
the tour operators, so that it would be visible, certainly to law enforcement, that these persons are properly permitted to be operating a tow operation on the beach.
That's my concern, is somehow that we can verify that they are permitted, okay?
So
With that, I'll open the floor for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve, but we add a license procedure similar to what we're using for the horse tour operations for their vehicles, so that we can ensure that they have been inspected by the sheriff's department if they're authorized to be out there.
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on. Consideration of resolution of the Board of Commissioners for Currituck County, North Carolina, requesting the state of North Carolina provide financial assistance for a planning study for a hydraulics and hydrology analysis of a sub-watershed located within the Moyock Township. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. McCree. No.
Wow. You're on a roll.
I was guessing on that one.
Everything's out of order this meeting, isn't it?
It is. I'm easily tricked.
I'll be brief. After the storm events we had in the county in September, one of the areas that was hit particularly hard was the Summit Farms area of Currituck County, the Moyock Township, and we had a series of meetings following those storm events, and at that time, there was a lot of frustration among the community about why is our property flooding? What's the problem? What can the county do to assist? What resources are out there? And so we ended up approaching the Army Corps of Engineers to see if it was possible to try to model that particular watershed to understand, number one, why is it flooding? But then number two is what if anything, can be done to help control the flooding to some extent. And so we just kind of took a shot in the dark and contacted the Army Corps, and they actually, and this isn't there's a permitting section of the Army Corps, which we usually deal with, but there's also a planning section of the Corps
which is much easier to deal with, in my opinion, being planners. And we contacted that agency, and they actually have a program that's a cost share between the federal government, the state, and the county. And what it does is it lets, among other things, you can do what's called a planning assistance study, where the Corps will come in and help communities identify not only flooding issues and why they're flooding, but what you can do to try to combat or try to deal with those issues. And so we actually are to the point now where that study's been approved by the Corps. The state has money available to cost share, so what we end up having is it's a watershed modeling study. It's very detailed. It includes survey level data for the Moyock area surrounding Summit Farms. It includes Eagle Creek ranch land and areas all the way up to South Mills Road, to the north side of South Mills Road. Actually, it's probably about a third of the Moyock Township, and it's a drainage area that's all connected hydrologically. And so what this study will do, the Corps will come and they'll survey, study, and provide recommendations to the county for strategies to try to deal and mitigate with these flooding issues. The total cost of the study is about $190,000. I don't have the exact number. My math's not great, but about $190,000, and the Corps pays 50% of that, and that leaves the state and the county to pay the remaining 50%. When that's divided up, the county's 25% match is $48,250. The state pays $48,250. Then the Corps pays the remaining $96,500. So it's close to a $200,000 study that the county is able to participate in with a $48,250 match. What I'm here tonight is putting a resolution in front of the board. In order to participate in the program, the Board of Commissioners has to adopt the resolution allowing the county to move forward and begin negotiating the program and the study with the Corps and the state. So I'm asking for your consideration tonight of this process and your support of the resolution and adoption so we can move forward and undertake this study for the Moyock area. And I can answer any questions you have. I think there's a scope of services in your agenda package as well as some additional information. And if you've got questions, I can try to answer those.
Thank you, Mr. Woody.
Mr. Woody, I understand the scope. Does it obligate the county after we get the study, we digest it, to any other monies that would have to be put out?
It does not. All it does, it provides an inventory of what issues exist and then potential solutions for how to address those, but there's no obligation beyond that study itself.
Thank you.
Where does that 48,000 come from? Is that in the stormwater district now, or we have to?
You actually have a budget amendment tonight. If the board was to approve this to move that money, excuse me, it will not come out of the storm districts, being since the majority of the area being studied is not currently in a district. If you give me a second, I can go look at the budget amendments and see where we're pulling from.
Mr. Woody, is this an annual?
Dan, that was enough. I just wanted to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Woody, is this an annual financial assistance we can provide for? Can you do it every year, or just got to justify it, or?
No, it's just a one-time cost to conduct this study. Once the study's done, any additional work would be up to the discretion of the Board of Commissioners in terms of how and when you fund that. So we're just getting a study in place to help us understand some of the stormwater problems.
Well, I just make it. Could we use that for other parts of the county? Or
Yeah, I understand. So yeah, this is, in my opinion, this is probably the first time that we're actually conducting a engineered study of a watershed area. So we're looking at flooding exclusive of any political boundaries or exclusive of any neighborhood boundaries. We're looking at, well, what is the boundaries of what's actually causing the flooding? So I think it could be a model that we could use for other watershed areas within the county. So if this is successful and we have a good relationship with the state and the federal partners on this, and yes, perhaps we can address other areas of the Moyock Township or other townships with a similar approach. But I do see this as a model or a blueprint for how we can address, at least begin to plan for flooding issues into the future in a systematic and scientific way, not just kind of throwing darts in the dark, so to speak. So,
okay, thank you.
Any further questions? With that, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion for approval for the resolution.
I'd second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to the consent agenda.
I have several questions if we want to separate it.
Okay.
My first one is number 3. Do you want to do 1 and 2, or do you want me to just go ahead and take out my section?
You can do it however you want.
Section 3, Project Ordinance Corporate Area Apron Phase 2. My question there is, I also see it as number 9, a grant agreement, and looking at it, some of them seem to be somewhat the same if you look at what's on page 71 and then what's on page 92. I mean, I'm trying to understand all of it in itself. I guess that's my question, Mr. Scanlon, is what is different about it that it's in 2 different sections?
Item number 9 is the execution of a grant agreement between the state of North Carolina and Currituck County for the state to provide 90% of the cost of the construction. Item number 3 is actually creating the local budget to undertake the project locally.
All right. Going into item number 7 and 8, which would be the consideration of the county manager employment agreement and the county attorney employment agreement. There's a section in there. Let's see if I can get to that real quick. All right, on slide, I believe it's going to be 83, on the county managers, where it talks about item 2 and 3, such as in the event the voluntary resigns and then in termination cause. That when I look on for the county attorney, I don't see those same causes. It seems like we're holding the county manager to a higher standard and not the same standard. I think, without a doubt, I think both employees are very important. But I was concerned that maybe we'd need to look at having those section 2 and 3 also for the county attorney. And then my other question would be,
Hold on, Mike, if we can answer one question at a time. Mr. McCray, if you can assist with that.
I think we addressed he loses his ball.
Well, the managers is a, I guess, entirely new document, and what you have before you with regard to the county attorney's agreement is an amendment to that which currently is in place. The full contract does speak to, well, you see it here with regard to the county may terminate my agreement, for example, if I'm convicted of a felony, disqualified to practice law for any reason. So that would be for cause with regard to my agreement. But I mean, if the board wants to have similar for cause language, I don't see it be a problem doing that.
Isn't that the same thing, pretty much?
That's my question, I guess, when it comes to that, is because we only have 2 causes where I think the county manager and the county attorney adding those other causes, number 3, to the county attorneys would benefit us to having the same reasons to remove or keep an employee.
I view them a little bit different, only because our county attorney, if he's disqualified and can't practice law, that pretty much puts him in a place that,
Can't do his
he's
job.
not going to be able to work for us. So that kind of puts everything into perspective for me as far as a legal stance. So that's why I see that differently.
Well, he could still keep his license if he was insubordinate, convicted of a felony, which is the same he already has, moral turpitude, consumption of alcohol or controlled substance on county property during employment, theft, embezzlement. These are reasons he still could possibly keep his license, but
Okay, I see where you're going.
I'll just say I have no problem if the board would like to add that language.
You said yours is an amendment. Is this language in the original or not?
Not those specific words, no.
There are only two things.
I would guess at this point, if you want that changed, you would put that in your motion.
Do we want to take and,
I'm fine with that. We
He
would
says he's good with it. So,
determine
so
that
you're
by the
you're
vote.
you're asking for number 3, termination of cause shall be effective immediately for insubordination, conviction of
Those-
felony,
those
moral
additions.
turpitude to Ike's contract.
Correct.
I mean, I would take my amendment, and you see the last paragraph under section 1 of the amendment. Replace convicted of a felony or disqualified to practice law. That's reason for termination. Replace that language with the language that is
Or in
included.
addition
addition
to.
to- in
It would be
addition
in
to.
addition to.
Sure.
in addition to?
Okay.
But I also look at number 2. I mean, is there something in yours that talks about if you decide to resign, that you would give us 1 month?
Actually, I think mine requires greater notice.
Yeah, I thought it did.
Just
Yeah.
want to make sure, okay.
Okay.
Any further discussion on the consent agenda?
There'll be, I think that's it. Let me just make sure. The other question I had, and it may already be answered, is in reference to their contract. If they were to leave by voluntary versus where, in other words, I say 6 months has come up and it is time, that we're not going to renew your contract. There's language in it that says that it'll be 12 months or greater. As long as I'm within the 6 months, is that 12-month a different terminology, or is it where if I tell him it's 6 months, he says, all right, now I get 12 months severance package?
The agreements provide for automatic renewal unless the Board of Commissioners gives the respective employee 6 months advance notice of there not being any intent to renew. If the board gave the attorney or the manager that notice, then the contract would run its course and would terminate and expire. There would only be any kind of payment due if the next sentence kicks into place, which is if there is dismissal without cause.
Just want to make sure those 2 words are separate. Thank you.
All right. Well, you got
Any
the
further
file.
discussion on the consent agenda? With that, I'll open the floor for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion for approval with the addition of adding the number 3 to the county attorney's agreement.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. McCree. Moving on to Commissioner's report. Mr. Hall?
Nothing, sir.
Thank you. Mr. White?
Nothing for me this evening. Thank you.
Mr. Beaumont?
Received a forwarded copy of a response of an email this week, I believe. Sorry. Yes, I read emails. And anyway, it was referencing our request for both Senator Cook and Representative Steinberg to introduce local legislation relative to some of the issues that we, the county, have been trying to get a handle on. Specifically asking for local legislation giving us greater flexibility and latitude with some of the larger residential structures. The response from Senator Cook's office to the individual will cause me a little bit of consternation, notably that it appeared as though the senator was not in support of the resolution that we had requested or the legislative action that we had requested. After speaking to his assistant, Jordan Hennessy, this morning, I'm here to report to the board that that should not be interpreted to mean that he is in opposition to our request, but he stated to me that it had to do primarily with the load the legislative load that they were facing relative to local legislation. So part of what I requested is that in the future that they actually let us know before we find out on a reply to a constituent's email as to his actions. So I got assurance that that communication would be more forthcoming in the future. The second issue I have this evening was that after touring H2OBX as well as with the joint meeting between Fire EMS and first responders with H2OBX, there is a lot of concern about northbound traffic being able to access the park during the summer months, largely due to traffic. One of the questions that I asked was, had they communicated that to Mr. Scanlon, their concerns? I think this is one of those, it is intuitively obvious to all of us that there's going to be a traffic issue for northbound traffic trying to get across 158 and into the park. And we don't need to have either a fatality or an absolute backlog to prove this wrong, to prove that that's going to be an issue. So I don't know what we can do to expedite DOT's consideration of a light installation at that juncture, but if they have not forwarded you all of their correspondence to date with NCDOT, that was requested last week that you get a copy of that. And somehow we need to try and fast track that so that that be considered sooner rather than later.
Okay. My office has not received anything to date, but I will tell you that NCDOT is a reviewing agency for that project, and so they did review the submittals. They reviewed the traffic analysis, and I believe the only requirement, in fact, I think our staff's requirement was there was a decel lane for the southbound. I don't believe DOT did not request or require anything as far as a light. Historically, DOT's position is they install lights based on historic data, which is directly to your comment, but we certainly can make that request to DOT.
If we could please do that. It's we're going to have car accidents. We're going to have that's inevitable, and we don't. I would prefer that we get ahead. Okay. If they tell us, sorry, we're going to wait for the bloodshed, that's fine. But
Mr. Commissioner, if I could just piggyback, I had a conversation with DOT regarding this. I sat down and had a face-to-face locally and on the phone, because as well as the fire department discussing this. And what they flat out told me is right now DOT, number one, because of the cost, and for some reason DOT is concerned about who's going to pay for the light bill. And then number two, their next concern was you're going to have a light that's for 6 to 8 months of the year is just going to be flashing on the main highway, and it's only going to be in use for a certain amount of months during the year. And that right there did not justify enough for them to put a light in at this point. And they've heard the concerns from the local fire departments, the ones that are responding, and they understand the traffic issues. But those are the main concerns that were voiced to me. As of right now, they're going to wait to see, as you put it, what might happen. And but right now, they're not going to put a light.
I would almost suggest that if you asked H2OBX to pay for it,
they might.
I can't speak for them, but I don't think that they would, again, that's something that I'm sure they'd be willing to discuss, especially the light bill. Are you kidding me? That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Beaumont. Ms. Etheridge?
Mr. Chairman, I serve on the Social Service Advisory Board, and I'd like to report there's a new Senate bill titled Family and Child Protection and Accountability Act, SB 594. This bill is calling for the reform of the child welfare system in North Carolina and proposes a regional system of operation. And I would like to report that the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners and the North Carolina Association of County Directors of Social Services are working together to reach a position on this bill, because this bill will affect Currituck County and all 100 counties in North Carolina. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Etheridge. Ms. Gilbert?
just wanted to let everybody know that on Saturday, the animal shelter had their first Easter egg hunt. We had close to 100 persons who were in attendance. And with that, we had 3 of the 4 kittens adopted that day and 2 potential agreements for adoption for 2 of the dogs. So I think that was a very successful day, just having extra traffic at the animal shelter and exposing our community. We had some folks as far as Suffolk and Norfolk who actually were in attendance at the animal shelter on Saturday. So I just want to applaud the staff and the volunteers that are working at the shelter to get the word out, and the partnerships that are being formed with surrounding shelters to really get the animals to good homes.
Thank you, Ms. Gilbert. Mr. Payment?
I'm just going to reiterate about the fire departments. We had a work session before this meeting with Corolla Volunteer Fire Department with some of the concerns, and Lower Currituck's got their traffic concerns coming up, and the water park's definitely going to add to those. So if you've got time out there to be active in your volunteer fire department, whether in some fashion, please contact them. They're always looking for volunteers. All the locations from Moyock, Lower Currituck, Outer Banks, Corova, Corral, they just need support. So just keep them in mind. And thank them anytime you see them for what they do for the citizens out there and trying to keep this traffic flowing too. That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Payment. I don't have anything this evening. County Manager's report?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scanlon. With that, I will recess the regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners and move into closed session pursuant to GS 143-318.11A6 to discuss personnel matters. Thank you.